The scent of rain and old books filled the small apartment, a comforting aroma that always welcomed Arthur home. But tonight, it felt different. It felt like a cage. He stood by the window, watching the city lights blur into a watercolor painting of neon and shadow. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic rhythm that was not his own. In his hand, a small, cold piece of metal. A key. But this key did not open any door in his home. It opened a life he had kept buried for years. Outside, the world was oblivious. Cars moved like rivers of light. People walked under umbrellas, lost in their own stories. But in this quiet room, two worlds were about to collide with the force of a supernova. He could hear Ilara in the kitchen, the soft clinking of plates, the gentle hum of her voice as she spoke to their cat. She was his anchor, his truth, the one pure thing in a life built on a foundation of lies. And he was about to destroy her. His handler's voice echoed in his mind, cold and sharp. The asset is compromised. We cannot have loose ends, Arthur. You know the protocol. The protocol, a clean slate. Erase the past, erase the connections, erase her. He looked at the key again. It was his only way out, a final escape route planned long ago. But it was a route he had to take alone. How could he look into Ilara's eyes, the eyes that held all the trust in the world, and tell her that their life together was a carefully constructed fiction? A floorboard creaked behind him. He turned, his body tense, his training taking over. It was Ilara holding 2 cups of tea. Her smile was a beacon of warmth in his cold, dark world. "You seem a million miles away tonight," she said, her voice soft with concern. She placed a cup in his free hand, her fingers brushing against his. The touch was electric, a painful reminder of everything he stood to lose. He forced a smile. "Just a long day at the museum," he lied. The words tasted like ash in his mouth. She looked at him, her gaze lingering. She saw the tension in his shoulders, the flicker of fear in his eyes that he could not quite hide. She had always been able to read him like his favorite book. She glanced down at the strange key in his other hand. "What is that?" she asked, her curiosity gentle, innocent. But to Arthur, the question was a gunshot in the silent room. This was it, the beginning of the end. He had to choose, his life or hers, the spy or the man who loved her. And in that single, heart-stopping moment, he knew that no matter what he chose, their world would never be the same again. Their life was a quiet symphony of simple moments. Mornings began with the gentle sunlight filtering through their bedroom window, painting golden stripes across the wooden floor. Arthur was always the first to wake. He would move with a silent grace, careful not to disturb Ilara. He would make coffee, the rich aroma filling their small apartment. It was a ritual, a silent promise of a new day, another ordinary, beautiful day. Ilara would find him in the kitchen, and he would have her favorite mug ready. She would lean against him, a silent thank you, and they would watch the city wake up from their little perch above the world. To the outside world, Arthur was a man of books and history. He worked at the City Museum, a curator of forgotten stories. His colleagues saw him as kind, intelligent, and perhaps a little shy. He spoke of ancient artifacts and long-dead kings with a soft passion. No one would ever suspect that his hands, which so carefully handled fragile pottery, were trained in arts far more dangerous. His life was a masterpiece of camouflage, a carefully curated exhibit of normalcy. He was the quiet neighbor, the reliable friend, the man who blended into the background. Ilara was his opposite in many ways. She was vibrant, her creativity spilling into every corner of their home. She was a children's book illustrator, and her studio was a chaotic, wonderful mess of watercolors, sketches, and storyboards. Her laughter was the true music of the apartment. She found joy in the smallest things. The way the light hit a dust mote in the air, the purr of their cat, the taste of fresh strawberries. She loved Arthur with an open, unwavering heart. She trusted him completely. She believed his life was as simple and honest as her own. They spoke often of the future, a small cottage with a sprawling garden far away from the noise of the city. Ilara wanted to grow roses. Arthur dreamed of a library with a fireplace, where he could read for hours. It was a shared dream, a gentle blueprint for a life of peace. They were saving for it little by little. Every coin dropped into a jar on their dresser was a brick in the foundation of that dream. It was a future that felt so close, so real. It was a future built on a single fragile lie. Sometimes Ilara would notice small things, tiny inconsistencies in the man she loved. She would see him watching a crowd, his eyes moving with a strange, analytical precision. Or she would wake in the middle of the night to find him standing by the window, completely still, as if listening for a sound only he could hear. When she asked, he would just smile, kiss her forehead, and tell her he was just thinking. She always believed him. Why would she not? He was her Arthur, the man who read her poetry, the man who held her when she had a bad dream. He was her safe harbor in the storms of life. She never imagined that he was the storm itself. The call came late on a Tuesday. Arthur answered it in a hushed, clipped tone, his back turned to Ilara. She heard only fragments. Unavoidable. A last-minute conference. I will be back by Friday. He hung up the phone, his face a mask of strained calm. He explained that a rare manuscript had surfaced in Geneva, and the museum needed him there immediately. He packed a small bag with a practiced, detached efficiency that felt cold to her. He kissed her goodbye at the door. His lips were firm, but his eyes were distant. I love you, he said. The words sounded like a final plea. A few hours after he left, Ilara was tidying his study when she saw it. His old leather briefcase, the one he was supposed to take with him. He had been so flustered, so distracted that he had forgotten it. A wave of sympathy washed over her. He must be so stressed. She decided to do something helpful, something loving. She would take it to him. She called a car service to the airport, a small romantic gesture. But when she arrived and checked the departures board, there were no flights to Geneva scheduled for that evening. Not one. A small, cold knot of confusion began to form in her stomach. Perhaps he had to take a connecting flight. She tried to reason it away, but the doubt had already taken root. She went home, the heavy briefcase feeling like a block of lead in her hands. The quiet apartment suddenly felt strange, unfamiliar. The pictures on the wall, showing them smiling and happy, seemed to mock her. Her mind raced, connecting dots she had never seen before. The strange hours, the sudden trips, the way he sometimes looked at her as if he were memorizing her face. A desperate, gnawing need for the truth began to consume her. She looked at the briefcase. It was locked. He always kept it locked. He had told her it contained sensitive museum documents. Her heart pounded as she remembered a conversation from years ago, a playful argument about hiding places. He had told her the safest place was in plain sight. She walked to the bookshelf, her fingers tracing the spines of old books. She stopped on one, a thick volume on ancient codes and ciphers. She pulled it from the shelf, and a small flat key fell from a hidden slit in the spine into her trembling hand. With a deep breath, she placed the key into the lock on the briefcase. It turned with a soft, sickening click. The world fell away. Inside there was no manuscript. There was no museum paperwork. There was a sleek black handgun, a silencer attached to its barrel. There were 5 different passports, each with his photograph but with a different name. There was a thick bundle of cash in euros, dollars, and yen, and nestled in a foam cutout was a small, encrypted satellite phone. As she stared in disbelief, the phone screen lit up. A single line of text appeared, cold and brutal. Target is aware, the liability must be neutralized, await instructions. The word hung in the air. Liability. She was the liability. In that moment of horrifying clarity, she heard a key in the front door. Arthur was home. He walked in, his face etched with panic. He saw her. He saw the open briefcase. And in his eyes, Ilara saw not the gentle historian she loved, but a stranger. A dangerous stranger whose entire life was a lie. The silence in the room was a living thing, heavy and suffocating. It stretched between them, thick with betrayal. Ilara looked at the man she thought she knew and saw only the chilling reflection of a stranger. His mouth opened, but the words that came out were hollow echoes. Ilara, please, I can explain everything. But how could he explain a lifetime of lies? How could he explain the gun that was now a third presence in their home? Her heart, which had felt shattered only moments before, was now encased in ice. Fear was a cold, sharp poison in her veins. She took a step back, her hand reaching for the phone on the table. A call for help, a call to the police, a call to anyone in the real world. Before her fingers could touch the screen, Arthur moved with a speed that was inhuman. He was not the gentle, slightly clumsy man who tripped over rugs. This was someone else. He took the phone from her hand, his eyes not looking at her, but scanning the window, the door, the very air in the room. "There is no time," he whispered, his voice urgent, stripped of all warmth. "They are here." He had seen it. A flicker of movement in the building across the street, the glint of a scope, a black sedan parked where a spot was always empty. The pieces clicked into place with the cold certainty of a trigger being pulled. The agency was not waiting. They were closing the net. He grabbed her arm. "We have to leave. Right now. Do you understand?" She flinched at his touch. Trust was a word that no longer had meaning, but the sheer primal terror in his eyes was something he could not fake. It was real. It was contagious. She allowed him to pull her, not out the front door, but towards the kitchen. He opened a small pantry, pushed aside a false back panel, and revealed a dark, narrow staircase she never knew existed. "This way. Be quiet." The words were a command, not a request. As they descended into the dusty darkness, she heard a faint sound from the apartment above, the splintering of their front door being forced open. They emerged into a rain-soaked alley, the city's grime clinging to them like a shroud. "Leave your purse," he ordered, his voice tight. "Your wallet, your keys, everything. They can be tracked." She hesitated. Her entire identity was in that small leather bag, her life. He did not wait. He took it from her, dropping it into a puddle without a second glance. He pulled the hood of her coat over her head and guided them into the labyrinth of the city at night. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Every distant siren sounded like it was for them. They ran, hand in hand, two ghosts fleeing a life that had just been executed. The warmth of their apartment, the smell of her paints, the soft weight of their cat sleeping on the bed, it was all gone, wiped clean. Their first stop was a place without a past, a grimy, anonymous motel on the edge of the city where the neon sign flickered like a dying heartbeat. The room smelled of stale smoke and despair. The thin blanket on the bed offered no comfort. They were two islands in a sea of silence. Finally, in the dim, humming light, Arthur began to speak. He told her about the recruitment, the training, the missions. He spoke of a shadow world that operated just beneath the surface of her own. He said he had been trying to find a way out for years, ever since he met her, because the life he built with her, the lie, was the only thing that had ever felt true. Ilara listened to the words, but they sounded like a story about someone else. The man sitting across from her was the curator of a museum of secrets, and its most prized artifact was her heart. She wrapped her arms around herself, feeling utterly alone. They had escaped, but they were adrift in a wilderness of danger and deceit, with no map and no destination. The days that followed were a blur of grey concrete and faded floral wallpaper. They moved like ghosts through the circulatory system of the city, never staying in one place for more than a few hours. They rode buses to nowhere, sat in the back of dimly lit diners, and slept in motels that rented rooms by the hour. The cash Arthur had grabbed from the briefcase was dwindling, each crumpled bill a grain of sand falling through the hourglass of their escape. Every new face was a potential threat. Every siren was a closing door. The city they had once called home was now a hunting ground, and they were the prey. The constant, gnawing fear was a physical weight. It stole their appetites and haunted their sleep. For Ilara, the emotional toll was even greater. The man beside her was a paradox. He was her protector, guiding them through the shadows with an expertise that was both terrifying and life-saving. But he was also her captor, the architect of the prison they now found themselves in. One rainy afternoon, in a cold, damp motel room, the fragile dam holding back her emotions finally broke. The tears came, hot and silent. "Tell me one thing," she whispered, her voice raw. "Was our life just a story you told yourself? Was I just a character in your cover?" Arthur looked at her, and for the first time since the escape, His mask of control crumbled. The super spy was gone, and in his place was just a man, his heart breaking. "No," he said, his voice thick with unshed tears. "You were never the cover. You were the only part that was real. You were the reason I wanted to stop. You were my dream of a normal life." His confession hung in the air, a fragile bridge of truth over a chasm of lies. But before she could process it, his head snapped towards the window. He had heard it, a subtle change in the rhythm of the rain, the sound of a car engine that did not belong. They had been found. Two men in dark suits were moving towards their door, their steps measured and confident. There was no escape. The room was a trap. Panic seized Ilara, cold and absolute. But Arthur was calm. He grabbed the thin motel blanket from the bed and a cheap lighter from the nightstand. He moved to the fire alarm on the wall. "When I tell you to, run for the emergency exit at the end of the hall. Do not look back. Do not stop." He set a corner of the blanket on fire, the synthetic material catching with a sickening whoosh. He jammed it against the smoke detector. A piercing, deafening alarm began to shriek through the building. Doors flew open. People poured into the hallway in a confused panic. In the chaos, Arthur grabbed her hand. "Now!" he yelled over the noise. He did not fight. He blended. He used the panicked crowd as a shield, keeping his body between Ilara and the direction of their pursuers. He was a phantom, a whisper in the chaos he had created. As they burst out of the emergency exit into the cold, wet alley, Ilara looked at him. In the flashing red light of the fire alarm, she saw it. This incredible, dangerous skill set was not just for deception. He had used his training, his instincts, his very essence, not to harm, but to save her. He was protecting her. In that moment, he was not the spy who had lied to her. He was the man who was willing to burn down the world to keep her safe. It was a terrifying, beautiful, and undeniable truth, and for the first time in days, a tiny, fragile glimmer of hope lit the darkness. In the relative safety of a pre-dawn city bus, Arthur finally revealed his desperate plan. There was one person, and only one, who might help them. A man named Marcus. He had been Arthur's first mentor at the agency, a master of the old school of espionage, a man who saw the world in shades of grey. But Marcus had grown disillusioned with the agency's brutal methods. He had seen too many good people become pawns in a dirty game. Years ago, he had simply walked away, vanishing off the grid so completely that most agents believed he was dead. Contacting him was a gamble of the highest order. If the agency was watching his old accounts, it would be like firing a flare into the night sky, showing them exactly where to find their targets. They could not use a phone. They could not use a normal email. Instead, Arthur led Ilara to the hushed halls of the city's central library. He sat at a public computer terminal, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He navigated to a long-forgotten corner of the internet, an online forum for a vintage chess club. He found a specific game, a match that had been dormant for over a decade. He posted a single cryptic comment: "Pawn to King's Bishop 4, a risky move, but the only one left." It was a code they had established years ago, a signal of extreme distress. It meant, "I am compromised, and I have nowhere else to go." The wait for a reply was a unique form of torture. They were exposed, sitting in the open, surrounded by strangers. Every cough, every footstep sounded like an approaching agent. They found temporary shelter in an old, quiet church, sitting in a back pew as if in prayer. Ilara watched Arthur, saw the lines of exhaustion and fear carved into his face. He was not just risking his own life anymore. He was risking hers on the ghost of a friendship. After what felt like an eternity, he returned to the library. His face was pale. There was a reply. Another chess move. It was a time and a location. A bustling farmer's market, midday, the most crowded and public place imaginable. The market was a kaleidoscope of color and sound. The smell of fresh bread and spices filled the air. But for Arthur and Ilara, it was a landscape of potential threats. They stood by a fruit stand, trying to look casual, their hearts hammering in their chests. Was this Marcus, or was it a trap? A few minutes past the designated time, an older man approached them. He was unassuming, dressed in a worn jacket, with eyes that were tired but missed nothing. "That move you played," the man said quietly, not looking directly at Arthur. "It always was your weakness, too much heart, not enough strategy." It was Marcus. He did not waste time with pleasantries. With a series of subtle gestures and turns, he led them through the throng of people, down a side street and into an old unmarked van. He drove for hours, leaving the city behind, twisting through country roads that did not appear on any map. Their destination was a small isolated cabin, tucked away deep within a dense forest, overlooking a serene lake. It was completely self-sufficient, a fortress of solitude. As they stepped out of the van, the clean, crisp air felt like their first breath of freedom. Marcus looked at them, his expression a mixture of pity and resolve. "You are safe here," he said. "For now, eat something, get some rest. Then you can tell me exactly what kind of storm you have brought to my door." In the quiet sanctuary of the cabin, a new feeling began to take root. Hope. Marcus laid out the grim reality. Running forever was not a solution. The agency, under the command of Arthur's former handler, a ruthless man named Silas, would never stop hunting them. Their only path to a real life was to fight back, not with weapons, but with the truth. They had to expose the corruption that had poisoned the organization Arthur once believed in. They had to take down Silas. Arthur knew his protocols, his procedures, and his fatal flaw, his arrogance. He believed he was smarter than everyone else in the room. While the two men spoke of strategy and spycraft, Elara looked at the problem with a different set of eyes. Marcus had managed to acquire fragments of agency data, schedules, and reports. To the spies, it was a jumble of code and logistics. To Elara, an artist who spent her life observing details and finding patterns, something stood out. She noticed a series of coded expenses, all linked to a private art gallery. It was Silas's one indulgence, a secret meeting place. She had found the chink in his armor. With this knowledge, they forged a plan. They would not run anymore. They would set a trap, and Silas's own pride would be the bait. The plan was daring. They would leak a carefully crafted piece of false intelligence. They would make Silas believe that Arthur, the desperate rogue agent, was going to sell a list of the agency's darkest secrets to an investigative journalist. And the meeting would happen in the one place Silas would never expect, yet find perfectly logical: the Grand Hall of the City Museum. It was the heart of Arthur's cover life, a place he knew better than anyone. Arthur would be the bait, returning to the city that wanted him dead. Elara refused to be left behind. Her role was vital. Using her artistic skills, she forged a series of documents and photographs that made the story of the journalist completely believable. She would be their eyes and ears, operating from a nearby communications hub set up by Marcus. The night of the planned meeting, the museum was a tomb of silent history. Moonlight streamed through the high arched windows, casting long shadows that danced like ancient spirits. Arthur stood by a display of Roman pottery, his heart a steady drum in his chest. He was no longer running. He was waiting. He wore a small, nearly invisible earpiece, a direct line to Elara. Her calm, steady voice was his anchor. "He is approaching. Alone," she whispered. The grand doors at the end of the hall creaked open. Silas emerged from the darkness, his silhouette sharp and menacing. He did not bring a team. Just as Arthur predicted, his ego demanded he handle this betrayal personally. "You always were sentimental, Arthur," Silas began, his voice dripping with condescending pity. "Hiding among your precious relics." He spoke of duty, of loyalty, of the greater good. He tried to manipulate Arthur, to pull him back into the shadows, but Arthur was no longer his puppet. "Your idea of the greater good is a lie," Arthur said, his voice clear and strong. "It is about power. Your power." The conversation grew heated, Silas admitting to the illegal operations to the order to eliminate Elara, convinced he was in complete control. That was his mistake. "The thing about history, Silas," Arthur said calmly, "is that it is always being recorded." He gestured to a small, nearly invisible security camera. A live feed of their entire conversation was streaming directly to a secure server managed by Marcus. The truth was out. Realization turned to fury in Silas's eyes. He lunged at Arthur, but it was too late. At that exact moment, every light in the grand hall flashed on. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed from all directions. Tipped off by Alara at the perfect moment, museum security swarmed the room, their weapons raised. Silas was trapped not by walls but by his own recorded words. The war was over. The aftermath of the confrontation was a quiet storm. Silas was not arrested by his own people, but by a special unit from the Justice Department, people who operated outside the agency's long reach. His look of stunned disbelief as they led him away in handcuffs was a victory more satisfying than any physical fight. From a secure room, with Ilara's hand held firmly in his, Arthur watched it all on a monitor. The ghost that had haunted them was finally being exorcised by the harsh, clean light of the law. The nightmare was ending. Marcus's gamble paid off. The recording of Silas's confession was a key that unlocked doors that had been sealed for decades. He delivered it to a trusted contact, a woman of integrity high within the government, who had long suspected that a rot had set into the intelligence community. This set in motion a swift and silent investigation. Arthur was brought to a secure, undisclosed location, not as a prisoner, but as the investigation's star witness. Ilara was right there beside him, a silent testament to the human cost of Silas's shadow war. For 2 full days, Arthur spoke. He unburdened himself of the years of secrets, of the missions that crossed ethical lines, of the culture of paranoia and power that Silas had fostered. He laid out the entire conspiracy, his words painting a vivid picture of an agency that had lost its way. The data from Marcus provided the framework, and Silas's own arrogant words provided the final damning proof. The official listening to his testimony saw not a rogue agent, but a man who had been trying to find his way back to the light. He saw a man who had risked everything for love. The dominoes fell quickly. The investigation was surgical, precise, and absolute. Silas and his network of loyalists were dismantled. Their careers ended not with a bang, but with a quiet, unceremonial dismissal. They were stripped of their power and authority, left to face the legal consequences of their actions in tribunals hidden from the public eye. The corrupt branch of the agency was pruned, allowing for the possibility of new, healthier growth. The threat was not just contained, it was eliminated. In the final meeting, Arthur and Ilara were presented with a large manila envelope. Inside were documents, new birth certificates, new passports, new driver's licenses. They had new names, a new history, and the resources to build a new life anywhere in the world they chose. It was more than a pardon. It was a blank page. "Your country owes you a debt of gratitude," the official told them, her voice sincere. "Your old life is over. Officially, you are free." As they walked out of the building and into the bright, warm sunshine, they felt the crushing weight of the past finally lift from their shoulders. They were no longer running from a life of lies. They were walking towards a future of their own making. 2 years later, the world of spies and shadows was a distant, half-forgotten dream. In a small, sun-drenched village on a quiet coast, a man named Leo worked with his hands. He ran a small workshop where he repaired old wooden boats. The scent of salt and cedar had replaced the sterile smell of secrets. He found a simple, profound joy in making broken things whole again. His movements were calm and deliberate. The tension was gone from his shoulders. The haunted look was gone from his eyes. He was a man at peace with the sea and with himself. A woman named Anna lived with him in a small white cottage with blue shutters overlooking the turquoise water. Her art studio was filled with light, and her canvases were explosions of color. She no longer illustrated the stories of others. She painted the world as she saw it now, full of vibrant life, gentle light, and boundless hope. In the afternoons, she would walk down to the beach and teach the village children how to paint the waves and the clouds. Her laughter, once a sound Arthur feared he had silenced forever, now mingled with the joyful shouts of the children and the cry of the gulls. The past was not forgotten, but it had been transformed. The scars had healed into reminders of their strength. Their love, which had been tested by the most extreme circumstances, was now their greatest anchor. It was a quiet, comfortable love, built not on grand gestures, but on shared cups of tea in the morning, on long walks along the beach at dusk, on the simple, unspoken knowledge that there were no more secrets between them. Their life was no longer a story written by others. It was a simple, beautiful poem they were writing together, day by day. One morning, a postcard arrived in their small wooden mailbox. The picture was of a grand, sunlit temple in a foreign land. The handwriting was familiar. The message was short, but it held a world of meaning. It seems we both found our quiet harbors. Enjoy the peace. You have earned it. It was from Marcus. They smiled, happy to know their friend was also free, finally enjoying the world he had spent his life protecting from the shadows. They placed the postcard on their mantelpiece, a small token from an old life that had led them to this new one. That evening, Leo and Anna sat on their small porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in strokes of orange, pink, and gold. The sea was calm, a gentle, rhythmic whisper against the shore. He wrapped his arm around her, and she leaned her head against his shoulder. They did not need to speak. In the peaceful, comfortable silence, they found everything they had ever fought for. They were not hiding. They were not running. They were simply living. They were home. Their incredible journey has come to an end, but the questions it leaves behind are powerful. Can a love that was born from a lie ever find its way to an unbreakable truth? How far would you go to protect the person you love, even if it meant deceiving them? The story of Arthur and Elara is a testament to the resilience of the human heart. It shows us that trust, once shattered, is not always lost forever. Sometimes it can be rebuilt piece by piece into something even stronger than before. They faced a world of shadows, a world where danger lurked behind every corner. But the greatest battle they fought was not against spies or agencies. It was the battle within their own hearts. It was a fight for forgiveness, for understanding, and for the hope of a future that seemed impossible. Their story reminds us that everyone has a past, but it is the choices we make today that define our tomorrow. They chose to face the truth together, and in doing so, they earned their peace. We would love to hear your thoughts on this emotional story. What part of their journey touched you the most? Do you believe you could have forgiven a betrayal as deep as the one Elara experienced? Share your feelings in the comments below. Every story is a conversation, and your voice is an essential part of it. Let us know if you think Arthur truly deserved his second chance, or if the secrets he kept were too great to overcome. Your perspective helps our community grow and connect. If this story of love, danger, and redemption moved you, please consider showing your support by giving this video a like. Each like helps us reach more people who are searching for powerful and meaningful stories like this one. And if you would like to join us for more tales of life's incredible challenges and triumphs, please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. We are dedicated to bringing you stories that inspire hope, encourage reflection, and celebrate the strength of the human spirit. Thank you for spending this time with us. We are so grateful to have you as part of our community. Remember that no matter how difficult the path may seem, there is always a possibility for a new beginning. We hope this story serves as a reminder that love and truth are forces powerful enough to overcome even the darkest of secrets. We look forward to seeing you again for our next journey into the heart.